The final heading on the page, political rebels. Writers were also rebelling against a political order that had, after victory over Napoleon's tyranny itself, become reactionary and repressive. They rebelled against an economic system that turned men, women, and children into factory hands. They idolized 17th century writer John Milton, in whom they saw a poet who stood up to kings and valued poetry for its prophetic strain. 726, top of the page. Next question. What political traditions did the Romantics revive? The sonnet. Romantic poets revived the sonnet, which had virtually disappeared after Milton. Wordsworth used it as a political form in London 1802, and Shelley as a visionary form in Ozymandias, and in Ode to the West Wind, which is made up of linked sonnets. The next heading, the ode. In addition, the Romantics brought to perfection one of the oldest forms of poetry, the ode. Odes were written by Wordsworth, Coleridge, Shelley, and most notably 24-year-old John Keats. Next heading, what mysterious literary figure did the Romantics create? First heading, the Byronic hero. You want to write that one down. Lord Byron embodies in his life the spirit of the age, a handsome, club-footed aristocrat who scorned the rules of society. He was described as, quote, mad, bad, and dangerous to know, end quote. Byron created in his person and in his characters the Byronic hero, mysterious, brooding, threatening. That hero is the distant ancestor of today's mysterious outsiders, whether in film, literature, or the graphic novel. Next question. What prose genres did the Romantics invent? The leading novelists of the period were Jane Austen and Sir Walter Scott. Austen created a kind of comic novel that focused on the manners of middle-class people, depicting the follies and foibles of families. Her insights into human behavior and her comic touches have inspired today's directors to make film versions of Austen's Emma and Pride and Prejudice. Scott, regarded as the inventor of the historical novel, took readers back into history, myths, legends of England and Scotland. A bestseller of his time and the creator of an enduring genre, he fed the romantic hunger for the distant and the exotic. Next heading, the Gothic. Many of you have heard this term. Now we're going to maybe get a definition of it. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, influenced by the relatively new tradition of the horror-filled Gothic novel. Dr. Frankenstein, in creating his monster, acts out the great romantic theme of going beyond the limit. The novel reveals the disquieting shadow cast by science and reason. Frankenstein's monster, in his immense solitude, also seems to warn of a darker side of romantic ideals, of a humanity that, seeking to redefine itself, is instead cut off from its origins. Let's see the three vocabulary words on 726. Let's now jump to 727, the British tradition and contemporary connection. In the box there, let's read. Jane Austen, movie star. At first glance, Jane Austen, a 19th century novelist, seems an improbable box office draw. She never married, lived with her mother and sister, and died at age 41. Her novels lack sensation of the kind that modern audiences might be thought to crave. They mostly depict the lives of well-brought-up young ladies as they embark on the marriage go-round. Yet, since the 1990s, there have been literally dozens of successful film adaptations of Austen's books. Some have been faithful to the original setting of her works, such as the 2005 Pride and Prejudice starring Keira Knightley. Other movies, such as Clueless, have transplanted plot and characters to more contemporary settings. In 2007, the film Becoming Jane was made about Austen's own life, a fact that would certainly have brought a wry smile to her face. As Hollywood has discovered, Austen's portrayal of human nature hits the mark every time. Her heroes and heroines may wear top hats and layers of petticoats. They may ride sedately in horse-drawn carriages. However, in their King's English, they speak directly to today's audiences who see in these characters dilemmas and decisions, reflections of their own. Let's turn now to 728, and the Elizabeth McCracken recent scholarship information talks about the time period. Elizabeth McCracken, you can read there on 728, was born in 1966 in Boston, Massachusetts, to editor-writer parents. Elizabeth McCracken worked full-time as a librarian until 1995. She draws on her love of that profession in the novel The Giant's House, a romance from 1996, which was a National Book Award finalist for fiction. Other works include the notable collection of short works, Here's Your Hat, What's Your Hurry, from 1993. First heading, Creating a Legend. Mary Shelley wasn't the first person to imagine creating a living being out of something dead. The subtitle of Frankenstein, The Modern Prometheus, refers to the mythological Greek titan who made men out of clay. In a famous Jewish myth, a learned rabbi creates a creature out of clay to protect the Jewish people. Throughout the 18th century, inventors created increasingly complicated automata in early robots who could eat, make musical instruments, and even play chess. People have always been fascinated by trying to create life or the appearance of it using non-living material. Next heading, Science Explained. But Mary Shelley was the first writer to explain the notion of someone creating an actual living, breathing being using scientific methods. She was the product of her times. The 18th century was a time of enormous scientific discovery, including the work of Isaac Newton, the father of modern physics, the chemist Antoine Lavoisier, and Benjamin Franklin with his experiments into electricity. Scientists and philosophers of the 18th century spoke of the new science, meaning that the universe could be understood by human beings who observe the natural world. Page 729, part of the natural world heading. In the early 19th century, writing and science became more aligned than ever before. Percy Shelley was a passionate student of all the sciences. His college room was filled with his experiments. John Keats studied as a doctor. The Dr. Darwin mentioned in Mary Shelley's introduction is Charles's grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, who was not only a doctor, botanist, and inventor, but also a best-selling poet. William Wordsworth, Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, and John Keats all read Darwin and took what they learned about the natural world and applied it to their poetry. To be a human being was to be part of the natural world, and to write about nature, you had to study it very carefully. When the Romantic poets wrote about nature, they were writing about the human condition. We are nature, and nature is us. And Mary Shelley might suggest we better not mess with it. Frankenstein is filled with real and imagined science, but one of the reasons it's been popular for so long is that at the dawn of the modern science, Mary Shelley talked about how it was both exciting and dangerous. Before writing Frankenstein, Mary Shelley had had a child who died a few days after birth. In her journal, she writes of a dream in which the baby, quote, came to life again, and it had only been cold, and we rubbed it before the fire, and it lived, end quote. She knew the pain of wanting to bring something that was dead back to life, and then she wrote a book about the dangers. Frankenstein had many children, characters from Blade Runner, RoboCop, The Terminator, clones and androids, and any number of science fiction novels. You give something life and then it goes amok. Even now, when people argue about the latest scientific advances, transplants of animal organs, artificial organs, and of course cloning, Frankenstein is often the cautionary tale. We are nature, and nature is us, and we can never hope to completely master it. Okay guys, well there you go. That's the introduction to the Romantic period. We will turn now to page 731 in part 1 to enjoy our study of Unit 4. Thank you.